Ladies and gentlemen, please take your seats.
It's important to really be able to see the costs, the human costs of revenge and of hatred. And if you're within the sound of my voice, that must mean you're in the seats with once more. As always, my name is Dave Voigt, and I'm the host of this podcast where we sit down with a wide-ranging variety of industry professionals and pick their brain, not only about their current project, but how they got started, state of the industry, anything else we can think of in a light and conversational way, because that's how we like to do it around here. And if you'd like to subscribe to our podcast, we certainly hope that you would, because you're listening right now. You can find us basically wherever you get your podcasts. Apple, Spotify, Google, Amazon, it's all good. And plus you can find every single one of our episodes archived over at our YouTube channel. Also, we'd love it if you'd follow us on social media. That'd be great. You can do that over at Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at either In the Seats or at It's Podcast One for all sorts of fun updates. And finally, and arguably most importantly, please pay us a visit over at In the Seats, intheseats.ca, for all the latest and greatest movie news and reviews from the world of film, television, and beyond, and basically anything else that we can think of, because we love watching stuff and we love telling people about it, and that's kind of how we roll. But on today's episode, we got a good one. It's a film that played TIFF, and it's hitting TIFF Virtual Cinema this Friday before it goes to digital on demand next Friday, March 26th, and it's called Violation. It's a real brutal film, but it's an excellent one, and it is written and directed and produced by Dustin Mancinelli and Madeline Sims-Fewer, and Madeline also stars in the film. It's a revenge thriller, but it's a revenge thriller that isn't afraid to sort of not glorify it, if that makes any kind of sense. It really is very much a brutal but incredibly compelling watch at this character study of a woman who is violated and is pushed too far, and the costs that she puts herself through to sort of get vengeance, but also the price she pays in the process thereof. It's a deeply unsettling film, but it's one you can't look away from. And we talked with Madeline and with Dusty just about the origin of the story, how it all got started, and sort of influences, and the ride that they've had sort of doing the festival run mid-COVID, and sort of getting their film out into the world. And it's a really interesting watch. So if you're in Toronto and want to rent it from TIFF Virtual Cinema tomorrow, I do recommend it. Otherwise, you can wait a week and find it on digital or on demand, from whatever provider you prefer. But I hope you enjoy our talk with Madeline and Dusty, because I certainly know I did. It was a good one. I can't remember the last time I saw a revenge thriller that wasn't afraid to sort of lean in to and own the fucked up nature of it. And I'm kind of curious, what was the initial inspiration on your end, not just to tell the story, but to tell it with that sort of bent?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thanks. It's really great to hear that the film resonated with you. So we met at the TIFF Talent Lab in 2015. And at the time, we were just both making our own short films, but we were both looking, I think, for a collaborator. And we had this opportunity to go back and do our master's in film production. And it was there that we started experimenting with this idea of working together in a creative partnership. So we directed 3 short films together. And I think it was the first time that we really enjoyed the process of making a film, not just having made something. And around the time of making our second short, we started writing Violation. And our friendship was really founded on our own shared histories of trauma and abuse in our past. So the film comes from a very personal place. And I think at the time we were talking a lot about like the tantalizing nature of revenge and how easy it is as someone who's gone through a traumatic experience like that to fantasize about wanting to enact your revenge.
And how satisfying it is as well to just kind of slip into fantasy and think about, this is how I could get my comeuppance.
And we noticed, like, we love the revenge genre, but there's a sort of wish fulfillment that happens within that space where we glorify or sensationalize the process of revenge. It's a really cathartic experience. We cheer on the protagonists as they destroy their villain. And we were just more interested in the grisly nature of revenge, and what is the toll it takes on someone's morality, and how does it affect their emotional, psychological underpinning as a human being, and what is the kind of consequence of revenge. And I think that was really what drew us to tell the story the way in which we told it. And I guess we're probably both dealing with a lot of anger. So there's a lot of, because there's a provocation to the film simply because it's our first feature, we've produced it, and we didn't want to feel in any way that we were censoring how we wanted to tell this story. And that, I think that kind of bleeds through.
Yeah, I think revenge as well is such an age-old concept. I mean, even when you look at the death penalty, there's kind of a collective hunger for revenge, and feeling like revenge is resetting the natural order a bit.
Sure.
And when we really thought about it, we thought what the reality for us, we imagined, would be that it would completely destroy your sense of self and destroy your kind of inner equilibrium as a human being.
Yeah, so the film's almost designed to scare you into not wanting to seek revenge. It's an anti-revenge film in many ways, because it's a cautionary tale. Miriam doesn't learn the lesson in time. By the time she learns the lesson, she realizes that she's destroyed everything around her.
Well, and I mean, I think that's one of the things that really resonated with me, because it wasn't necessarily a film that was glorifying or going out of its way to show the violence, but we could hear the violence. And that's the thing that felt sort of insidious and then got under your skin. Can you talk a little bit about just being conscious of that, maybe in the moment, to sort of make this be a film that plays out sort of not just with your eyes in the shadows, but audio, like, audibly as well?
Yeah, for sure. I think for us, dread is really important within this space, and trying to create that anticipation, that looming threat, that anxiety that you feel as a viewer. That's more terrifying to us than a jump scare.
Yeah.
And there are these really great moments, we realized in writing the film, these really quiet sequences where there's no dialogue. It's a 10-minute action sequence. And it was a perfect opportunity to think about what are the sounds that we could hear in this space that would really make our skin crawl. It's the sound of him breathing, struggling to breathe under the bag. It's the sound of the zip ties wrestling against the wood. It's the scraping of the wood, thumping up and down against the hardwood. So it was, I think, early on, just thinking about our natural environment and how we can use that to kind of heighten and amplify our experience. Because for us, it was really about trying to make a film that was very, very visceral. So the sound is a really great opportunity, even with the natural sound elements in the film, like the screaming loons and the geese, and all of those elements play such a strong role in transporting the audience into that place.
Yeah, I think body language and sound were very important for the performances as well. And it was something we were thinking about even from the beginning of this, kind of, when you look at an animal, when you look at a wolf or a rabbit, their body language and the noises they make tell you everything you need to know. So the sound of, that's why, for example, having the throwing up in the film be real was so important, because those sounds that come from deep inside a human's body when you're retching cannot be faked.
Yes,
they can't be mimicked. And the sound of, there's a scene that's totally black in the motel where Miriam has a panic attack, and we just wanted to capture the sound of somebody who's just completely losing it.
It was the dripping for me. Just that made my skin go. It was so visceral. It put me right in the moment. And I mean, I think that kind of dovetails into my next question, because this is a film where energy is high. And I'm kind of curious, Madeline, especially from your perspective, like you must have had to maintain this really sort of high level of, I don't want to say anger, but sort of frenetic, sort of weird energy. I'm kind of curious, how did you sort of balance that while, you're working in the moment?
Yeah, I think honestly, working with Dusty, we've really created a language between as co-directors and as actor-director, where it's very easy to drop into something because we've had 3 short films to practice it. But I think also having the crew that we had was so integral. They were so supportive of the emotional state that I had to be in, and it was, like you said, very high tension, very there was a lot of rage in it. And I think just having that support network there, having these people who didn't ever make me feel weird about having to go to that place, and then who were very generous and kind at the end of every take, and everyone was constantly just kind of making sure I was okay, which I really appreciated. You know, you don't get that a lot as an actor. I think actors are sometimes viewed as a little bit frivolous and silly by filmmakers, and it can be seen as almost this sort of mystical process. But it is just as kind of grueling as any other task that you have in a film.
I think, one thing that really connected us as collaborators was our desire to really strive for naturalistic performances and really make performance kind of the center of how we approach directing. And we design our sets, like the practicality of how we shoot things, around the physicality of the performances themselves, not the other way around, which is typically what you find on a set. So we remove some of those technical obstacles, like we don't have marks, we shoot with all natural light, we don't have light stands everywhere, and we do tail slates, and we sometimes run the same scene like 4 or 5 times in a row, as much as we possibly can, to create an environment where it really gives the actor the opportunity to play, find like raw naturalistic moments, and where they have the space to do those things, where they're not bogged down by the technical limitations of filmmaking. And again, I think echoing what Madeline said, it's about finding a crew that is comfortable working in that way, because I think it's very unusual, because it's not what's typically done. So you want that support where they really believe in this idea of creating that space for actors.
I think also, as a woman and an actor, it was actually really amazing to play a part with so much anger, because there aren't many opportunities to play parts like that as a woman. There's lots of opportunities to be upset and to be vulnerable, but there's not a lot of opportunity to just go full tilt into rage and fury and anger and betrayal.
And it's such a fascinating ride too. I mean, especially at the beginning of the film. I mean, as an audience, we're not necessarily sure about Miriam, and we don't necessarily like her. But then, as the thing goes, we're scared of her, but we're also sympathizing with her all at the same time. It makes for an interesting dynamic, and I'm kind of curious, just sort of as storytellers, because I mean, I always find like the best stories are the ones that like don't hit you over the head with it and sort of leave the sort of the subtleties left unsaid. How important is it for you guys to sort of tell this story in a very powerful and resonant way without having to use that sort of literal sledgehammer to get the point across?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think there are certain story beats and elements where for us at least, we want to make sure that they're not nebulous. It's really clear what those are, because otherwise it leads to confusion or totally misrepresentation of the film. But we're so drawn to anti-heroes, and when we talk about our favorite characters, we kept coming back to Walter White and Travis Bickle, and they're all men, and we don't see a lot of female anti-heroes, and women are often portrayed as either evil or virtually morally complete. And there's really no kind of gray in between. It would have been really easy, I think, to make Miriam just a super likable character so that we're really playing on your emotions, but it's far more complicated to watch a character who feels like someone who's like, there's a line in the film, who's medium shitty. She's not terrible, she's not perfect, she's complicated, she's a complex woman. And it's just because this terrible thing happens to her doesn't mean that she's not able to make herself whole.
Now, obviously, the film's been doing the rounds for a while. I'm kind of curious, how has the response been for you guys? I mean, you've had to do it all virtually, but like I said at the beginning, like this is a film that gets uncomfortable. It's a film that isn't afraid to sort of lean into the horribleness of the subject matter.
Yeah, it's been super strange. In many ways, we've lucked out because at least on the festival circuit, there's been a real spotlight on the movie simply because festivals have been cutting their lineup. And so a tiny little film like this, it's a low budget film with no stars. It's our first feature. Normally we wouldn't, I think, had as many people watch it in a regular year. So there was a huge advantage there. There was 2 physical screenings at TIFF, and when they told us, we were super excited. They sold 50 seats, and we're like, oh yeah, 50 is not bad. And then we went into the light box, and it's 50 of 650.
That's all we're allowed to sell. Yeah.
And you realize, oh well, 50 people scattered is really like they're in their own bubbles. And we spoke to the audience afterwards, and they couldn't hear each other. So we have not yet experienced that communal beautiful experience that you have when you go to watch a movie like this. And if it was at the Ryerson with 1,500 people cheering and screaming, and
we were getting ready for walkouts, and
you want someone
to faint.
You want someone to throw up, and then that's the article that someone threw up. Just that it elicits a very strong visceral response from an audience. So we've not had that, but we've been. I think Sundance was great because we actually had a live Q&A, and we could really get a sense of what the audience was thinking and we were able to have conversations. So that was really nice. In terms of surprises, I think we knew we were making a challenging and provocative movie. I'm a little bit surprised at how hung up people are when it comes to the
male nudity.
Yeah, the full front. We're not doing anything exceptionally new here in this space. Full frontal male nudity has been around for a while. I think what's interesting and enlightening to us is that because the man is being disempowered because he's in a very vulnerable position, and the woman has all the power, and that's the context in which we are viewing the male nudity.
Yeah.
It seems to really make some men very uncomfortable, and that's really fascinating. And I think that says something about society and the world we're in right now.
I think as well, just in terms of the festival experience for us during this time, we're kind of in a lucky position in that it is our first feature. So we have no idea what it's like to travel with a feature to festivals. So we've only made shorts, and nobody cares about shorts.
We're so used to making the short, going to festivals, and then that's it.
Yeah.
There's no expectation of the theatrical. And I think we're so lucky with Shudder who picked up the movie just simply because they're really leaning into this idea of broadening the scope of what is horror and taking on more challenging films that dabble in different spaces like this. You can say it's art house, maybe there's some art house elements. It's a thriller, it's psychological. There's
a drama for the first half.
Yeah, it's really straddling a lot of different genres. So, and the fact that they're embracing it for what it is and how it's been made, there's no talk of a TV censored cut. It's they're excited to present this version of the movie is really fun and exciting for us. We have been scouring Letterboxd to get a sense of what people are saying. And I always find it really funny when it's I accidentally watched this with my parents, and it's, you get a slight glimpse of okay, what that communal experience might be like. But, it would be lovely one day post-COVID, we'll try to get some kind of physical thing going. But
yeah, the 1,500 at the Ryerson, it would have been fine. I would have been more curious about your Q&A at the second public screening with everyone seeing the penis. That would have been the interesting one.
Yeah. You really know. But there's also, there's a benefit too that I think I've noticed some people saying, they're glad that their first experience watching the movie was at home, because there's a level of control in terms of the privacy of your own.
Oh, totally.
home.
Yeah.
Pause it. You're alone. You don't, if something makes you feel embarrassed or overwhelmed or you're shy about something, it's just you and the screen. So there's a level of comfort there that put people at ease, because it's also, a film that deals with a topic that for sure is going to be triggering. It's going to affect some people watching it. And I think it's probably a good thing that it was presented in that way.
Now, I'm curious for both of you, because, this is obviously a film that, like you say, can be triggering, and it's very much designed to sort of get you out of your comfort zone. Are those the kind of stories that you both are attracted to, ones that maybe sort of shake up the status quo a little bit?
I think so. I think that the for me personally, the films that have always affected me the most are those types of films where I feel sick, or I feel really uncomfortable, or I feel really angry because I've watched it. And even if I feel angry, I'll keep thinking about it and I'll keep coming back to it. And those are the films I watch again and again. So I think there definitely is something in provoking a response from people.
But it's not just provoking for provocation's sake. I think it's about
Exactly,
wanting things to stick.
Yeah.
And why are certain things sticking and other things aren't? And for us, it's about some people have not experienced trauma in their past. So our hope was, how can we mimic the post-traumatic stress that the body goes through and capture that residual trauma for an audience who's not experienced trauma, so that maybe they can empathize with someone who has experienced that. So that's really our goal. And I think those people who keep thinking about it, if the film is haunting them, then I think it's doing its job. It's really like allowing them to provide some insight into maybe something that they're not used to.
I mean, I think there are films that come to mind straight away when you ask that question, of films that provoked a response in me and made me think more deeply. And one that immediately I think of is Melancholia, where I don't suffer from depression, but that film really made me think deeply about, this is what it could feel like for someone. And this, I know, is what it feels like for Lars von Trier, who made the film about his own depression. But it gave me a deeper insight into that I never would have had before. And I think we definitely strive to make films that do the same thing.
Yeah, I think the most important thing is just that you remember it, because the worst movies are the ones where you're just,
Oh, you're right. You're absolutely right.
It's and I think, I also love, what's funny is, like, we also love the rewatchable movie. Now, this is not a rewatchable movie. It's like, so there's that balance too. Like, I remember thinking about the films that terrified me when I was really young, and I was like just too young to watch those kinds of movies. It was like, Natural Born Killers, or I remember watching when I was a kid, Requiem for a Dream. I was in high school. It's like, you probably shouldn't watch that movie when you're in high school, but it was something that really left such an impression on me, and it meant something to me. But I was like, I don't think I can revisit that, because it's such a tough thing to have to endure again, unless it's something I guess some people are seeking, which.
Well, when I first watched A Clockwork Orange, I think I was 13 or 14, and it sickened me to the very core.
I was the same way.
And I couldn't help but go back and watch it again, because there was something...
Like a fascination?
Yeah, there was a fascination. I wanted to know if I would feel that same way again. I wanted to... It's like when you don't look at something, but then you have to peek at it again. You're afraid, but you can't help but...
Yeah, it's funny, because I feel the same way about movies that I don't necessarily like on the first watch. Like, I remember Madeline was going on about Primer, and I just really didn't like that movie, and it forced me to watch it like 4 times to appreciate it. And there's something really nice about, as you age, you go back and watch a movie, and your experience of it changes, because so much of your interpretation of a film has to do with you in that particular moment in which you watch. And I think that's another thing that sometimes we forget.
No, and Primer's gotten better with age, so I'm with you. I'm with you there. That's one you got to revisit. But yeah, now I'm kind of curious, from both your perspectives, is there a movie that you can think of in your past viewing that was the pivot point for you to go, okay, I got to do this. I got to make films. I got to be a storyteller?
I mean, it's such a funny question, because when I think, I always wanted to be a filmmaker.
Yeah, me too.
Like,
I think this is something that I think we both bonded over, of like wanting to make films since we were really little kids.
My earliest memory is just my dad had an old RCA VHS camcorder, and I was obsessed with it. And I think there was just something about, there's like a safety in being behind something and looking out on the world. And then I remember the very first edit I ever made was just my sister going down into the basement, and it was just, I was upstairs, and I had the thought, what if I went down the stairs and did this in-camera edit? And suddenly this magical thing occurred to me, that I was like making something that didn't happen occur just through tape. And that was like just such a thrilling experience.
I think for me, I was always enthralled by film, and I always knew I wanted to do something to do with directing and acting and writing, but I didn't really quite know that or think about filmmaking as a valid career path. And I think it was The Godfather that I think when I was 16, I watched The Godfather for the first time. And that was the movie where I thought, I'm going to do this. I'm going to find a place to study this and films.
That's a good movie.
Awesome.
To inspire you.
Now, I mean, I think I've really connected with this film just because, again, at least personally, I've always connected with horror films, or if you can call this a horror film, but movies that make you think about the tension as opposed to sort of making you witness the tension. And I'm kind of curious, how do you sort of sell this? Like, for you, explaining to other people about your film, because it's not something that'll have you can sort of cut a super flashy trailer for. It's one that you have to sort of buy into it and let it sit and let it simmer and then let it make you be very uncomfortable.
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, for us, it was about the capturing a very specific feeling and experience and trying to, it's really, the sell is to simulate an experience, a thrilling experience for an audience that's really uncomfortable, unsettling, and is full of dread, and then has you on the edge of your seat. I think that's really how we tackle it. And
it was a really hard one to write a logline and synopsis for, because it's just kind of counterintuitive to what we wanted people to experience, because it gives, anything you write about it gives too much away.
And while we love horror, we just didn't want to feel like trapped by some of the tropes. Like, some of the tropes are great and we use them, but some of the times we don't want to use them. Like, for example, flipping the trope of having male nudity instead of female nudity, like letting the violence play out in wides rather than it being really sensational and glorified.
Having the revenge happen halfway
through
at the end.
Yeah, so you're really focusing on the aftermath and how it kind of unravels. But I love, like, within horror, the unconventional. Those are the most exciting to me. Like, I think Green Room's a horror movie. It's a perfect,
absolutely, yeah,
it's a perfect, like, Monster House movie, but with neo-Nazis. It's like such a brilliant concept. And because it's neo-Nazis and that's a real threat, those are real people, it's even more terrifying when you watch it, because you're like, oh yeah, the backwoods, middle of America, this could really exist, and I could really sense the danger here. Same with Jaws, like,
Don't Look Now as well, which is
totally,
a beautiful film about grief, but also is absolutely terrifying.
It's so funny too, because Jaws holds up. Like, Jaws is like 50 years old, and you look at that, and it's about the anticipation and the dread. It's not about the constant graphic violence. It's not torture porn, because I think that's kind of what. Oh, not where we're at, but it's like we've gone in certain directions in like the 2000s, where it's become horror has turned into a space where it becomes just, let's figure out all the different ways we can mangle bodies. And then there's a sense of like, that has no impact on me now. I'm totally desensitized by the violence, and the violence is not impacting me the way it should. Violence should be horrific. I think that's really why we wanted to ground it as much as possible, because it amplifies the experience of actually being in that moment.
I'm so glad you said Don't Look Now, because I mean, while watching the whole thing, there was that 70s feel. There was those sort of British horror movies like Roeg and like Black Windmill with Michael Caine and that kind of stuff. And I really got that sort of dread and sort of discomfort. And I think Shudder is a great place for you guys, especially internationally. And just congratulations again on everything for the film, man. It's a great piece of work, and I think it's a great example of Canadian filmmaking, because I think we've broken away from the mold of sort of what people see as Canadian filmmaking, and Canadian filmmaking is really all across the board at this stage, and you guys are a great example of that.
Thank you so much. It's great to hear.
All right, well, thanks again for the time, guys. That's it for me, but really, this was fun. And don't forget to visit our friends over at Bay Street Video for all your DVD, Blu-ray rental, or purchasing needs this summer, as they are still open for curbside and some mailing delivery as well. Over at 1172 Bay Street, Toronto, Ontario, Canada, you can give them a call at 416-964-9088. That's 416-964-9088. Or send them an email at baystreetvideoto@gmail.com for any of your DVD and Blu-ray needs.